ونترحم عليهم بالصوت. المجد للآب والابن والروح القدس من الآن وإلى الأبد. آمين.
Holy Mass at the Maronite Catholic Church in Anaya in Lebanon. The Maronite Church is a Christian church united with Rome, which recognizes the Roman Pope as its head. The Maronites are one of the largest and oldest religious communities in Lebanon. The church language is West Syriac. The Maronites trace the foundation and name of their church to Saint Maron, a Syriac Aramaic monk. They consider themselves apostolic successors through the episcopate of Antioch. Today we want to talk with a Maronite priest from Lebanon. He was already a guest in the previous edition of our program in his capacity as co-founder of the Lebanese Adyan Foundation. He is a professor of religious studies and a research associate at the University of Geneva and a visiting professor at several universities. One of his main topics is the dialogue between Christians and Muslims. He also written a book on this topic entitled Divine Hospitality, a Christian-Muslim Conversation. The book was published by the World Council of Churches in 2017. Interfaith Dialogue in Lebanon and elsewhere, and on the Pope's planned trip to Lebanon. These two topics today here on EWTN UN BLOG. Good day. He was already a guest on the previous edition of our program. I welcome in Geneva Professor Fadi Daou. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon, Christian.
Your organization, the Adyan Foundation, works to value cultural and religious diversity in its conceptual and practical dimensions. Well, even if it doesn't seem like it, but isn't religious diversity becoming an increasingly important factor of coexistence in societies?
In fact, religious diversity is becoming one of the main factors in our social life wherever we are. Maybe 1 century ago, we used to live in a kind of monolithic one religion or two religions societies, while today all societies are witnessing a growing religious diversity. So, as you mentioned, this is a challenge. This is not only a reality, a challenge, because with this social reality, being diverse religiously, should come also a capacity among the people, to be able to deal with this diversity. And we don't yet have it. It's not only, the problem of Lebanon, it's also across the world. People need to learn how to cope with, in a positive way, this religious diversity in their own societies. And here it's about education, awareness, religious narrative, and even, I would say, a political narrative too.
As you know, last year Pope Francis had announced his visit to Lebanon, or the Vatican had planned one. Do you think if Pope Francis comes there personally and meets with all the religious leaders there, that this could have a real impact on the situation of religions and how religions are viewed?
I do hope that during the next year, 2022, that Pope Francis would visit Lebanon. He promised, in fact, that soon he will arrange to visit Lebanon. And he is showing a strong support for the Lebanese population, in fact, with specific message sent to the Lebanese population, and more specifically to the Lebanese Christian community. I would say such a visit would have first an impact on the Christian community, because the Pope coming to Lebanon would send a very strong sign of support, I would say, of a universal, international support for the Christian presence in Lebanon and the meaningful message of this presence in Lebanon. And secondly, definitely a Pope like Pope Francis, who is highly engaged in interreligious relation, meeting the political and religious leadership of the country would have a kind of an impact. I won't say he will resolve all the challenges and problems in the country, but it would contribute in the good direction, I would say, in the conflict resolution and making the Lebanese society more peaceful, more inclusive.
Isn't it paradox that governments and organizations like the United Nations are constantly changing their original charters, adopting reports and declarations on the secularization and the elimination of religious values and language in society, while at the same time advocating interfaith dialogue?
This is very true, I think, and important to recognize that there are, globally speaking, a kind of two main tracks for public life values. You have I would say, the secular track that is reflected in international organizations like United Nations or some also government policies. And you have the faith-based or faith-inspired values, I would say, track. Sometimes there are in contradiction, unfortunately, and some decisions coming out from governments or from international organizations could go in an opposite direction than the religiously inspired values. But sometimes they collaborate. I see, for example, very recently there were a very important interfaith meeting hosted by Pope Francis in Rome about environment, about what is the role of the religious communities, different religious communities, what is their role in supporting, this battle for a better and more sustainable environment. And so they issued a text and a kind of a pledge that would be shared at the COP26.
Professor Daou, keyword COP26, if I may. At this point, I would like to refer to a meeting in the Vatican last year. Pope Francis gathered back then in October scientists, high-level religious leaders and experts at the Vatican under the motto Faith and Science, together towards COP26. During the meeting, the high-profile participants signed a joint appeal in view of the UN Climate Change Conference COP26, which was then approaching in November. Since we are also talking about Islam today, here's an excerpt of the speech by Ayatollah Ahmad, the head of the Islamic Studies Department at the Academy of Sciences in Tehran.
The environmental catastrophe that we are facing today, that has made life insufferable for many, is essentially a moral and intellectual crisis. And faith leaders can play a pivotal role in tackling it. Humans have two different ways to view the world. For some, nature is there to be exploited by and for the benefit of humans. Some, however, have a divine view towards nature. For them, everything in the world, human beings, animals, mountains, and oceans, are the all parts of one existence, representing and manifesting the Creator.
Why do you think so many people in Germany, in Europe, including Christians, especially with refugees and migrants coming into the country, are afraid of Islam?
I think there are reasons, in fact, for this fear among people. This is not only in Germany. I think even, we speak about Islamophobia as a real phenomenon in the whole world. I think the first reason is the very bad image that we saw about Islam when extremist and terrorist groups like recently, ISIS, pretended that they are representing Islam in what they were doing as terrorist acts, in fact. So this is a very strong reason for people to be afraid from what is Islam because of this image that is in their mind. The second reason, I would say, is ignorance, because also people from their side don't really know this religion that is the second largest religion in the world after Christianity, and the whole diversity within this religion. Unfortunately, Islam was hijacked either by terrorists and extremists, especially in the media, or by politics and politicians in Muslim majority countries who were just doing their own interest. While the whole Muslim population in the world, it's so diverse, and the majority of them are moderate people who would like to live their faith like Christians in a very peaceful way and in a very positive and inclusive relational way with their other fellow citizens. So I think the first problem is an Islamic problem where Muslims, Muslim scholars, religious leaders should face this problematic issue of Islam being used by terrorist groups and face them publicly to give the other image that we need to see about Islam. And some of them are doing this effort. I would mention, for example, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in his relation with Pope Francis. And the other problem is the problem of, I would say, our population. You mentioned Germany. I would say the German population or the Christian population, where this population has also to increase its knowledge about the diversity of Islam, and Islam cannot be just seen from this very, very narrow perspective of terrorism. And thirdly, let me add a last factor which is important. I think that some political groups, and especially in electoral frameworks within European countries, use, unfortunately, this fear among the population to increase their popularity and to show themselves as they would defend the community from the risks and dangers that would come from Muslims, which is a very dangerous, I think, political policy. While I think what should be done is how to show that European societies, German society, is an inclusive society based on human rights, accepting everybody, accepting religious freedom and respecting this freedom. But at the same time, it's a society that also puts limits to any group or person who would use violence to impose his or her views on the others in the society.
The director of Missiology Institute, Missio, in Aachen, Germany, described you as follows. Fadi Daou thus combines practice and theory. What he has thought through theologically, he implements in practical work. A Lebanese theologian who can give new impulse to the churches and to the coexistence in Lebanon. Compliments, and thank you for your important statements.
Thank you, Christian. I hope it will be useful for your program.
For us Catholics, as well as for all Christians, interreligious dialogue is a part of the evangelization and takes place not least on the basis of the documents of the Second Vatican Council, especially Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium. According to these documents, the Catholic Church worldwide, as well as in Germany, is especially committed to interreligious dialogue.